Hey, Ray Moses here. I'm going to be out delivering a quarter of beef today to a customer because I do sell freezer beef through my premium quality beef business. And a lot of questions about what's actually in a quarter of beef. So let's look at the actual take-home yield. A lot of times you take an animal to the butcher and we're always talking hanging weight, okay? So let me give you for an example here. This animal weighed probably a little bit over 1,100 pounds live weight. The hanging weight is about, on these grass-fed animals, is lower than a corn-fed animal. Corn-fed is going to be about 60-61% hanging carcass as percentage of live weight. So this animal had, we had a hanging weight here of 613 pounds. So the overall meat yield on this whole beef is 374.9 pounds, okay? So if I take a quarter of that, we take 1/4 of all the cuts to make a quarter of beef, okay? And I'm going to end up with 93 pounds of meat, okay? So and then out of that, I got 211 pounds of ground beef. So 56% of the yield of the animal is ground beef, and that's pretty typical, okay? The other number of cuts, like your steaks, like your high quality steaks, your rib eyes, your T-bones, your porterhouse, your sirloin, those comprise a little bit over 20% of the yield of the animal. And that's set based on the number of ribs and so forth. Sometimes you have a really big animal versus really small, you can vary the number of cuts of steaks, and also sometimes you can vary the number of steaks if you have some, like you're going to have your rib steaks cut super thick versus a standard 3/4 to 1 inch cut. So let me give you an idea. So for example, on a whole animal, we're going to get about 24 to 26 rib steaks, okay? So on a quarter of beef, you know, we're looking at about six rib steaks right in there, 6 or 7 rib steaks. Your T-bone and porterhouse going to be about 4 a piece for a quarter. Going to have 2 to 3 sirloin steaks. Let me give you a little bit up close about some of the variety of cuts you might get when you get a quarter of beef. So a lot of processors have a lot of different names for their beef cuts. But you know, brisket's pretty standard across the board. So this quarter's going to have a brisket. Going to have chuck eye steaks, which are kind of they're a very tiny part of the chuck roll that's been identified to have one of the most tender cuts in the whole animal. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association sponsors a kitchen in Chicago, and they do muscle profiling, get some value-added cuts. We got a tri-tip, a flank. You only get 2 flank steaks on a whole animal, 1 per side. So this quarter I'm throwing in that. Beef tip roast can also be cut as a sirloin tip steak. So that's one of those cuts that can go either or. Cube steak is typically made a lot of times out of the round steak area. So in this animal I didn't get around, I had it put into cube. This quarter is going to get 3 round bone roast, couple English roast. There's your 4 T-bone and porterhouse, which, you know, your porterhouse and T-bone are in the rear part of the loin. And really the only major difference is T-bones are generally a little bit bigger because T-bones will have more of a fillet part on one side of the bone, where T-bones hardly have any fillet part, or rather porterhouses have the fillet part. T-bones really mostly have part of the strip loin on the one side of the bone. Rib steaks, these are boned in rib. If they're boneless, we call them a Delmonico. Sirloin steaks, they're larger, you know, they're not custom cut to like a 4 or 6 ounce portion, so they're typically a couple pound steak. Flat iron steaks, you can get those. Hanger steak. We've got skirt steak here. Beef rouladen, cut from like the round area. It's cut in very thin strips. nice cut. So anyways, that gives you a little bit of an idea on what the percentages and yields are of typically on an animal. And to wrap it up, so typically if you're comparing the live weight of the animal to the meat take-home yield, it's like 35%. Okay, so we're talking like an animal that you feed them a lot of corn, a lot more fatty animal, they grow faster. You're gonna have a higher cutting percentage. You typically about 60% of the live weight's gonna be hanging weight, and then from that, about 60% of the hanging weight is going to actually be meat. So it could be confusing. I decided years ago when I was marketing beef that I was going to sell meat by the package, okay? I think it's just a less confusing way to do it. We're used to selling, a lot of people used to looking at beef by the hanging weight because that's how the processors charge us, the producer. But I don't really think it's a good way to deal with your customer. Now, in order to sell it packaged like this, by law, you have to go to a federally inspected facility. At least in my state, we don't have state inspection. So it's got to have a USDA stamp. So if I go to a non 100% USDA inspected facility, I have to sell it by the hanging weight, which means I'm selling you the animal, I'm not selling you the packaged meat. But being I take it and get USDA inspected, I could sell it packaged, okay? Another thing you can run into, the reason why I think it's more fair to sell it packaged versus by the hanging weight, let's say we have a 600-pound hanging weight carcass from a steer, and we got 600-pound hanging weight from a heifer. Heifers, I can tell you, they'll yield 10 to 15% sometimes less meat yield off that carcass than a steer will. So if you're going to be paying by the hanging weight, it behooves you to know, hey, am I getting a steer or am I getting a heifer? Okay? When we sell our calves at the auction, steer calves, heifer calves, that's why steers go for a lot more money. We all know that, us that are farmers. So that's just some of the numbers if you actually want to ever look at selling your beef by the packaged weight versus the hanging weight. A lot of us farmers, we're used to just that hanging weight, selling it on the rail. We don't really, a lot of times, a lot of people don't even pick up the inventory sheet. I get an inventory sheet for my processor because I am selling it packaged weight. Even when I'm selling a side or a quarter, I'm selling it packaged. You're getting all the cuts from the whole side, but I'm not selling it by the hanging weight. So it just seems like a more straightforward. It eliminates the confusion, especially with new customers. If they're buying a 600-pound carcass, they're like, where's my 600 pounds of meat? And you got to explain, well, you aren't going to get 600 pounds of meat. So, but hey, thanks for watching. I hope this helps some of you people that are looking into direct marketing your beef.